Hello, everyone. Holly here with Reality Sandwich. I am joined by Adam today. If you caught Adam's last video, we talked a bit about Bufo, the DMT filled toad that he had the experience of sitting with down in Mexico. And today we're talking about another experience down in Mexico, but this one is about a Temazcal ceremony and a psilocybin experience. So thanks for joining us, Adam. I'm excited to learn and hear about this adventure today.
Thanks for having me back, Holly. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It should be a fun and interesting conversation.
Nice. Well, let's start with the basics. What is a Temazcal ceremony? What happens at one of these events?
Okay, so prior to me trying it out for the first time a few years ago in Mexico, I didn't know what it was. I had no clue. Um, didn't know anything about it. I started seeing advertisements for it in Tulum, and then as I backpacked my way northward in the country, I started seeing more and more of it. Especially when I arrived in the state of Oaxaca, uh, I saw a lot of them, and eventually I went to San Jose del Pacifico, which is 3 hours south of the city of Oaxaca, and I did my first Temazcal ceremony there. Basically, it's a sweat lodge. In Temazcal is actually a Nahuatl word, the language, the indigenous language of the Aztecs and some other indigenous civilizations here in Mexico. And in that language, it means house of heat. And there's a couple of other translations, but that's the most popular one. So the best way to think about it is, a sweat lodge. This is like a sauna, steam bath. The Temazcal, I basically describe it like an adobe igloo. Without kind of the tunnel entrance. There's an arched entrance to get into the dome, the Adobe Dome, where the ceremony is held. And the actual Temazcal itself can be made out of a variety of materials. Traditionally, I think nowadays a lot of them are made out of adobe, but they can also be made out of volcanic rocks, cinder blocks, cement. So there's a lot of different types and varieties. But that's a good way to think about it, is a type of some kind of stone hard type of igloo, and there's no windows on it, doesn't let any light in. There might be a little bit of a hole at the top to let out a little bit of steam, but that's also usually covered up during the ceremony.
Okay, so this is a group event led by somebody who is this ceremonial. Obviously, I know you weren't using plant medicines during this ceremony, but is there some ritual involved, or is it like everybody pile in, it's time to get hot together? Like what happens when this gets
It,
going?
it's a little bit of both. It's physical, mental, and spiritual. It's based on an Aztec goddess called Tonantzin, and she's the goddess of Mother Nature, the mother of gods. And the Temazcal represents her belly or her uterus. So this is a chance to reconnect with Mother Nature, to reconnect with the earth, and to reconnect with ancestors also, and reconnect with your own inner self and spirituality. And so in the end, it's very symbolic of a rebirth, because after you leave the Temazcal, usually a ceremony that lasts an hour. You're leaving the belly of Tonantzin, so you're being birthed into a new person. So that's basically it in a nutshell. And although it can be a solo ceremony, it usually involves a group of people.
Okay, gotcha. And so is this a sweat lodge in a sense of like, so you're in this structure that you've described. Is there like fire or is it hot stones? Like what is the heating mechanism?
Okay, so yeah, that's a great question. There is no fire inside. What happens prior to the ceremony is volcanic rocks are heated outside. I think they might be basalt, I'm not sure, but some type of volcanic rock that can hold and maintain heat. And they're pretty decent sized rocks, about yay big, and they're heated until they become white hot. I mean, extremely hot. and they're referred to as medicina or the medicine. And they're also called the abuelas, which means grandmothers in Spanish. Just as the ceremony is about to begin, the rocks are shoveled into the temazcal, where inside there's a little fire pit and a fire ring, and they're put inside the ring, and that's the heating mechanism for the ceremony.
And that's just kind of the heat stays pretty consistent this entire time, or it builds as you go in?
Oh no, 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 no! It gets cranked up big time.
Okay.
It only takes a few minutes to start sweating inside. So there's another important note, is that once this ceremony starts, uh, there's usually blankets or some kind of fabric or tarp or something that's pulled down over the doorway to immerse the inside of the temazcal, in just utter pure pitch black darkness. So you can hear everybody, you can feel things, but you can't see your hand in front of your face like that. So you're sitting there in pitch black darkness, and then what happens is there's, three, four, maybe 5 rounds of increasing heat. So the person heading the ceremony is called a temazcalero, and he will use a sensor of sorts. This instrument or tool that's used in Catholic churches to kind of sprinkle parishioners with holy water. He'll have a couple of buckets of water next to him, and one has this like wildflower, herbal sensor in it. It's a bouquet of wild flowers and plants from the area, and he'll leave that sitting in one bucket of water, and then for these various rounds of increasing heat, he'll take that out of the water, the bouquet of flowers, and then splash it on the rocks, and then this dials up the heat, and it gets really really hot fast. And one of the other interesting things is that the types of plants in this bouquet, there could be half a dozen, a dozen or more. It really depends on their preference. But for example, it can have sage in it, sweetgrass, eucalyptus, and echinacea. So it's very herbal, and with the eucalyptus, it becomes almost like a super hardcore Vicks vapor rub as you're sitting in there breathing. Which, by the way, is another interesting thing to mention: is you're not supposed to breathe through your nose, because the temperature of the air is so hot, and your nasal cavity is very sensitive to heat. So it can be painful to breathe through your nose. It's one of the few times in your life when it's acceptable to be a mouth breather, because the moisture in your mouth actually cools the air. So you inhale and exhale through your mouth. And as you're breathing in this air, you get that menthol, that mentholated kind of taste and smell from the eucalyptus. And it's very, very beneficial, obviously, for your respiratory system.
Yeah, that sounds nice. Aside from the sweltering, overwhelming heat, but I like the, spa aspect you're describing.
Yeah, it's definitely like a spa for sure.
So this only lasts an hour, you said? About an
Yeah,
hour?
it's an hour, and it's more or less like a sauna. A temazcal is extremely beneficial for a variety of reasons. It's really good for the skin because it opens up all your pores, because obviously you're sweating profusely. You'll never sweat as much in your life. I mean, it's even better than or worse than, depending on your perspective, than a sauna. But if you just read up about a sauna online and the benefits of a sauna, the benefits are very much similar. And besides being good for your skin, it's obviously really good for your respiratory system. It opens up your sinuses. It's really good for mild depression, anxiety. There's just a whole array of benefits to doing this.
So when you finished your ceremony, were you planning on consuming mushrooms shortly thereafter, or was that just something that naturally evolved?
No, I actually had it planned out ahead of time. I had done a guided hike through the forest of San Jose with a local gentleman, and he proposed the idea. And it's really interesting, this area of San Jose, because it's a very unique ecosystem around the world, called a cloud forest. It's about, I don't know, like 6,000 to 8,000 feet high. And because of that elevation and altitude, it's for the most part very much like Seattle or San Francisco. It's very often wet, damp, rainy, foggy, cloudy, and because of this moisture, that's why so many of these plants in the surrounding forests are medicinal. And there's a lot of mushrooms that grow there. So San Jose might be, probably is Mexico's second most famous mushroom town after Maria Sabina's hometown, Cuautla de Juarez. So there's a lot of mushrooms, both psychedelic and non-psychedelic, that grow in the nearby forest. So this gentleman that brought me on the forest hike, he had suggested and recommended that after the Temazcal, that I should consider doing a psilocybin journey, because the Temazcal, one of the benefits of it, other benefits, is that it's cleansing out your entire body, mind, body, and spirit, and it's really making you like a blank slate or a clean canvas for the psilocybin to work on.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of just like doing like you would do a bit of a dieta before ayahuasca. This is almost a little pre-psilocybin purge in its own way.
Exactly, and that's a great point you bring up, because I've done a dieta prior to and during an ayahuasca ceremony, and the really hardcore one where I wasn't eating salt for a week,
Mhm.
couldn't have any caffeine. It was what I call the monk life. So yeah, this had some similarities to the ayahuasca dieta, and cleansing out your body, but slightly different. I thought there were a few similarities here with other kind of wellness and recovery, methods or modalities, similar to cryotherapy, and also float tanks. I've done a lot of floating in the past, and I thought there were some slight similarities with that as well.
That's interesting. Okay. So then tell me about this mushroom experience, where did this take place? What was the dosage? How
So
did how did it
I got
feel?
really lucky with this whole experience, because it was way off into the woods outside of town. And generally, I find that those off the beaten path places, the more rustic places, the places that are less advertised, are the most authentic and genuine. So it was at this gentleman's cabin in the woods, just in this beautiful valley in the mountains, in the woods. Like I never ever would have found it on my own. So it was really, really beautiful setting for the ceremony to take place. And of course, my set was really good after the Temazcal ceremony. So after the ceremony, when I exited the Temazcal, it's an incredible feeling. It's hard to describe. Because one of the things is that I got the end of the ceremony, the Temazcalero gave me a warrior's massage. So the Temazcal ceremony was often used by Mayans and Aztecs and Toltecs, and they frequently did it prior to a battle. They did it to go into battle with an increased amount of energy and alertness. And oh boy, let me tell you, coming out of that Temazcal, you definitely feel this. And no matter how hot it is outside, it's going to feel cool to you because of that intense heat inside of the Temazcal. So it's very similar to doing a sauna and then jumping into a cold lake. So you come out of the ceremony with this huge rush, and then about, I don't know, maybe an hour or so later, I'm handed a mushroom tea. So it's an interesting, yeah, it's a very interesting set and setting.
Okay. So mushroom tea was the format. Were you sipping slow, or were you interested in getting this show on the road?
Um, I was kind of more interested in getting this show on the road, because the tea was just going to get colder and colder, because they actually the day started out sunny, and then much like Seattle, San Francisco, it started getting cloudy, gray, dreary, overcast, and raining a little bit. So I didn't want the tea to cool down. I just wanted to get it done and over with. And then on a side note, it was interesting because not long before this ceremony, I was up in Maria Sabina's hometown. I'd done a psilocybin ceremony up there, and it was with cubensis. However, these mushrooms were more local to San Jose, and they're called derumbes, which means landslide in Spanish. They're called landslide mushrooms because they actually grow in the mud that falls down after a landslide. And little, unbeknownst to me, they are extremely potent. So it didn't take long for them to kick in at all.
All right, so a little bit more of an intense experience perhaps this time than your previous one.
Yeah,
So,
I've done a number of varieties or species of psilocybin and psychedelic mushrooms, and these were some of the strongest, if not the strongest, mushrooms I've ever done.
all right, what happened next? Tell me more.
Um, so the Temazcalero, the gentleman who owned the cabin, he was in his cabin with some other people that did the Temazcal ceremony. That they weren't going to do mushrooms, so I was just sitting outside his cabin by myself, and drinking the tea, and then eating the mushrooms that were floating in the tea afterwards. And so this was an interesting little change up because this wasn't an actual ceremony per se. Is what I call freelancing. You're just given your medicine, and then you just sit there in the forest, in the woods, and you do your thing, and they leave you alone. The Temazcalero, obviously wasn't a guide, but more of like a trip sitter. He's like, he told me, I'm not here to guide you. You go on your own journey. We want to leave you alone. We don't want to interrupt you. But if you need anything, you need help, you're worried about anything, just yell my name or knock on the door, and I'll give you a hand. So I was just kind of left to my own psychedelic devices then for the next, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 hours, sitting there in the middle of the forest at 8,000 feet or whatever, having just a very, very intense experience.
That's kind of a nice situation, though, I suppose. Like, hey, we're not going to bother you, but we're here if you need anything. Like, almost an, I mean, I don't want to say ideal for everybody, but for me, that sounds like kind of a nice way to be set up. Like, I'm not in a crowded room full of a ton of other people tripping their balls off, but I'm not totally alone here either. Like, there's a lifeline just right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, I totally agree. I love that too. I really like the ability to go from, a guided, more formal ceremony to just being on your own. I think that's where also a lot of magic can happen. So I really, really enjoy that. And yeah, just to commune with nature like that while on psilocybin, it's just it's an experience full of truth and beauty, and you're able to go deeper into the medicine and get more out of it when you're not interacting with other people.
Yeah, for sure. So, what was different about this? What really stood out about your experience with psilocybin this time? Like, was it because of this location? Was it because of the fact that you just did this deep cleanse before? Or were there just revelations during this experience that made it uniquely memorable?
Um, I don't really, I didn't really have any revelations during the journey, but what made it unique was, yeah, just set and setting. Yeah, I just had stumbled into just this beautiful, magical opportunity. So, my set couldn't have been much better after doing the Temazcal. And then the setting, being in this beautiful mountain valley at 8,000 feet, was just incredible. And on a side note, one of the benefits of Temazcal, which I'd love to see some studies about this. I doubt that there's any out there, but one of the things that this kind of sauna setting or sweat lodge setting will do is it stimulates brain cell growth through the stimulation of BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor, which is proven to stimulate neuroplasticity. And it's interesting because psychedelics, they turn off your default mode network, which then allows the two hemispheres of your brain to communicate more. And there's neuroplasticity involved in that afterwards. So, I wonder if this kind of Temazcal sweat lodge experience kind of jump starts that process to turn off the default mode network and get that neuroplasticity going. Then you put psilocybin or psychedelics on top of that. And I wonder if that really maximizes the benefits of psilocybin and really, launches you on an incredible journey. Because what happened was I was getting just intense open eye visuals, which I don't normally get with psilocybin, and the whole forest was alive. It was just an incredible uh, kaleidoscopic orchestra of just natural, truth and beauty. The whole forest was just swirling, pulsating, breathing, shimmering, shaking with sacred geometry, fractals. It was really incredible.
Did you feel comfortable like taking a walk or wandering, or was this not an area where you felt like you could go explore much further, or was
I
the
could
show just right there? So it's
Yeah,
good.
I could have, but I was totally uninterested because if you could just see what I was looking at, it was just, there was no need to. It was just such an amazing show, and I had a front row seat for it. So I just didn't. I was just so overwhelmed by the experience. I had no interest in getting up and walking anywhere, and it was raining and cloudy and foggy, and I just wanted to take it all in, and so I didn't really have any interest in exploring.
Yeah, sometimes it's just right there in front of you.
Yeah, yeah,
There's no need to
exactly.
be anywhere else.
Exactly.
Have you since experienced this combination of the Temazcal and mushrooms after this, or was this a one-time endeavor?
No, I haven't repeated it yet. I would definitely love to do so. I think a lot of it depends on finding the right temazcal. I think I was really lucky in finding this particular opportunity because there's endless temazcals around Mexico now because it's gained so much popularity. But the quality and experience of them varies widely. So I've done other Temazcal ceremonies here that were nothing like the one I did. The one I did involved, I thought it was kind of going to be a quiet, meditative, introspective thing. And it ended up being a raucous party. The Temazcalero was playing a tambor, a drum. He was singing, he was chanting, he was praying. At times, he asked the participants inside the Temazcal to say things and share things in Spanish, kind of answering why you were there, what you were looking for. I mean, it was like a party. And other Temazcal ceremonies I've done don't involve any of that. Sometimes they don't involve music, singing, chanting, and they don't have that party like atmosphere. So if I was to repeat, I would definitely like to find that kind of Temazcal ceremony again, where it's more of a party like atmosphere.
Yeah, that sounds cool. That's not what I was like picturing as you were saying this. I was picturing like, some type of silent suffering in the heat and not so much
Yeah,
like,
no, it wasn't like that at all. Some are like that, and I don't like those. No, the party like raucous, loud atmosphere actually helps to withstand the heat and the sweating. Because the other thing is all you're wearing is a bathing suit, and so you just get drenched in sweat. And then occasionally after each round that he dials up the heat, he then throws water on you, cold water, which then shocks your system. It's that idea that I mentioned earlier of going from a hot sauna jumping into a lake. And so the music and the chanting and the singing really helps you withstand the heat because it just gets to incredible levels that you don't think you're going to be able to withstand. And you can leave; they allow you to leave at any time. But that kind of solidarity through the singing, the chanting, the music, it helps you push further and withstand the experience and go in and introspect deeper and dig deeper for a type of resilience you never knew you had.
I wonder if there, maybe you would know if there are, retreat centers that really pair this type of Temazcal with specific psychedelic practices, because it seems like not to replace like what people are doing with a diet. I did the same thing you did, right? Like what you called like a monk diet. Like I was really serious, I was pretty much eating like bland vegetables for a week.
Yeah.
It was kind of how it
Yeah.
went. So
Anything white, nothing else. Everything's got to be white.
yeah, just like it was really intense. But that said, I'm just thinking of like how fantastic it would be to head to a retreat center where you kind of have this whole system support. Like, yes, it's about like the psychedelic experience, but something like a Temazcal and in how whatever format that is seems like would be such a huge benefit to get you prepared for this psychedelic space, like fast track to purifying the body in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if places like this exist, but I'm pretty sure they probably do. Like some of the advertisements for Temazcal I saw in Tulum, they were advertisements for retreat centers that also did plant medicine. So I imagine this pairing exists out there, not only in Mexico, but maybe at places in the United States, because I think Native Americans, inherited this tradition probably from Mexico, and then turned it into sweat lodges. And I imagine there could be some places in the southern United States that are doing similar things with sweat lodges and peyote. I know I've done a sweat lodge ceremony in Texas, and far southern Texas is peyote country. So I wouldn't doubt that something like this even exists in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing you talk about it, they do, it sounds like they pair so well together, just preparing the mind and body for that space. It's like, it's almost the beginning meditation to get you in the zone. Like
Yeah,
before a
yeah,
psychedelic experience, you can kind of sit there and think about your intentions and focus on your breathing and all that stuff. But when you're sitting in this hot house that is like, hey, I'm actually here, like what a fantastic way to get your head in the game.
yeah. I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. I think that these types of wellness, kind of methods or modalities in terms of whether it's a sauna, temazcal, should be paired more. I think we'll start seeing that. That'll start becoming a trend because it really does, prepare your set in an excellent way to go into a plant medicine ceremony. When I came out of the Temazcal, many Temazcals, the majority I've done, they have some kind of cement or rock floor. But this particular one that I did in San Jose, it was just dirt. So all the sweat, all the water just turns the floor into mud. And when I left, I was just covered in mud and pine needles and tree leaves and came out just like an absolute mess. And that's part of the magic because you leave feeling like a kid again. You're just a total filthy animal, but you have this super primal connection to nature, like you're a kid again, stomping in muddy rain puddles. So I think that's a really cool thing to do. And then I think also in the psychedelic movement, this may also spur post ceremony methods and modalities like this. I know I've run into some people that have talked about, wanting to do a float tank after plant medicine, and that would be incredible to do something like a temazcal before, and then the medicine, and then a float tank afterwards. I mean, that would be amazing. I couldn't think of anything that would be more incredible than that.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're going to start seeing some of these like wellness centers really start to adopt all the modalities. I mean, who wouldn't love to just have like a weekend away where you have all the hydrotherapy options, right? You have all of, you've got the Himalayan sea salt caves and, like the ice cave rooms and all the saunas and steam rooms and float tanks. And then, oh, and by the way, here's the menu of psychedelics. You can select your add-on kind of a
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, and I think in the West we lose the importance of loving ourselves and the ways that we can make ourselves feel better, and especially a lot of these ways that are outside of the mainstream. We almost, I think, kind of tend to have a guilty feeling about quote unquote pampering ourselves. But once you try these things and experiment with them and dabble with them, you're like, whoa, this is incredible. I need to be doing this as often as I possibly can. So I think these things will become more popular, and hopefully we lose our guilt about treating ourselves to a spa weekend.
Mm, yeah, I hear that. That's a really good point to make. And I agree that we have a harder time with that here. I think it's, sometimes it's hard to just slip away for a 1 hour massage. How could we possibly do that? So, yes, the concept of taking a day or multiple day trips to kind of rinse out your brain and body is a lot to process. But Wow. Even if it was just a mandatory quarterly thing that we put on our own schedules, like once a quarter, this is just what I do, or every couple months. I mean,
Yeah,
wow. What?
yeah, and that reminds me another interesting little point about all this. You mentioned the massage. So I had an add-on feature during the Temazcal ceremony. The Temazcalero asked me if I wanted to do a warrior's massage at the end of the ceremony. I was like, "Yeah, do everything. I want it all." And I lied on my back, and he kind of gave me these hard, kind of semi-hard hammer fists and chops, and then asked me to flip over onto my stomach. And I mentioned this in the article I wrote for Reality Sandwich. When I turned over, I've always had bad sinuses. And at this time, I wasn't even congested or anything. I didn't have any sinus issues. But when I turned over, man, my sinuses and nasal cavities opened up like a faucet, and my head just ran. And all kinds of mucus and junk came flowing out of my head. And then when I was on my stomach, he did the same thing with the chops and the kind of hammer fists to this really interesting boundary of like almost hurting, but not quite. And doing that all up and down my legs and my back, my torso. And this is another common thing that the Aztecs and Toltecs were doing to kind of prep for battle. So I kind of got a massage too in the middle of this whole day. So I mean, yeah, the therapeutic wellness, recovery, aspects of all this are really, really fascinating.
I love it. Well, I hope we can see more of it spread and become more available as we're lightening up on our psychedelic policies, and we can incorporate it not just mental health, but for physical health too, and how it can become a part of holistic well-being for everyone. I think that's all of our collective wish, right?
Yeah, yeah, and maybe on a final note, it's something that's overlooked in the United States is the connection to our body and then our connection to nature, and through these kinds of experiences, we connect more to our body, and then once we're more grounded and connected to our body, we feel how connected we are to nature, and that's just it's an exhilarating feeling that everybody needs to have at least once in their life, if not as often as possible.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for sharing. This was a great share your experience today, and yeah, thanks for joining me and being here again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Holly, and thanks for letting me share my experience. It's been a lot of fun again.